So Apple just dropped their M5 iPad Pro, and at first glance, it doesn't look like a big drastic change compared to the M4 iPad Pro, and that's because from a hardware standpoint and physically, they look pretty much identical. But there's a lot of things under the hood that Apple didn't even mention in the press release that we were able to find out after the fact, so here are 7 things that make the M5 iPad Pro a worthy successor to the M4 iPad Pro, and why I decided to pick one up, and whether or not you should pick one up. Let's get into it. But now, before we continue, if you enjoy videos like this one, we go over all things Apple both from a hardware and software perspective, consider subscribing to the channel. But now let's talk about the first piece, which has to be the brand new M5 chip in the iPad Pro. So let's contextualize this M5 chip for a second with the iPad Pro specifically, because the best way to do this, at least on paper, is to figure out the Geekbench scores and kind of go from there, comparing it to last year's model. So with the M5 chip, we're getting about 4,200 single core score for the M5 chip, and then in the multi-core score for the 10-core CPU version, which we'll touch on that in a little bit, you're dealing with a multi-core score of about 15,500, which is pretty insane when it comes to just a year-over-year comparison, and it's very similar to when Apple went from the A18 Pro to the A19 Pro on the iPhone, because we're getting drastic new architectures kind of changing, as well as new updates from a processing perspective, because we're getting about a 12% increase in CPU and a 15% increase in GPU scores or multi-core scores when it comes to the new M5 iPad Pro compared to the M4 version. But this is going to be the first M chip that has those neural accelerators built directly into the GPU, which is very similar to how the A19 architecture has been put together for the iPhone 17 lineup. But what that translates to in real world scenarios is that AI workloads are now 3.5 times faster than its predecessor because, again, this is a brand new architecture in the M5 chip. And then we're getting a 45% increase in graphic performance, as well as memory bandwidth increasing to 30% with 153 gigabits per second for internal uses of memory in the iPad Pro. So will this make a difference if you're just using Safari or going on YouTube or just doing kind of minimal tasks on your iPad Pro? It's really not going to make a difference, and you're better off even buying a used M1 version of the iPad Pro. But if you are pushing this to the extreme, you will be getting better sustained performance overall, especially if you are doing those AI workloads and you're realizing and really working on some graphic intensive type of applications, like those affinity designers of the world and everything else like Pixelmator that come with the iPad Pro, and you will be able to see substantial gains, and I'm excited to test it out, especially with my 4K video rendering outputs, M4 versus M5. So the M5 chip is going to be Apple's latest and greatest, and it's going to be something that's going to make a big difference from a hardware and internal perspective. But now some other things that came under the radar when it comes to Apple's M5 iPad Pro is that now the base version of the iPad Pro does start off with 12 gigs of RAM versus 8 gigs of RAM on the previous M4 iPad Pro. And then if you do go to the 1TB and 2TB versions of the iPad Pro, you now have 16 gigs of RAM, which is the same exact thing we got with the last year's version and years prior. And in that same light, when you do go into Apple's selector tool and when you go to buy the iPad Pro, and for the first time ever, Apple is showing us how much RAM and how many CPU and GPU cores are on each individual storage capability or capacity of the iPad Pro. So when you start off at 256, it'll tell you it's a 9-core CPU, 10-core GPU with 12 gigs of RAM, and then when you get to that 1TB version, you do get the 10-core CPU as well as the 16 gigs of RAM, and it's the first time Apple's showing us that on the website. Unfortunately, you still have to go to 1TB of storage to get the 16 gigs of RAM, which is very, very annoying, but hopefully this means, or at least this is alluding to, Apple letting us select all the different upgrades we want. Like, I would like to have a 512 iPad Pro with 16 gigs of RAM, but lo and behold, Apple is not letting us do that quite yet. Another thing Apple didn't mention is the charging capacity of these new iPad Pros. For instance, right now, and it's not even on paper, I believe they max out at around 38 watts of speed in terms of being able to charge this thing. But apparently, if you do pair the new iPad Pro with the new 40-watt/60-watt charger, it's kind of the weirdest names of all time, but you can charge your iPad Pro and fast charge it at 60 watts finally when you are using the correct power brick. I'm going to test it out with normal power bricks to see if that does work out. Like if I have a 100-watt power brick from a different company, I'm going to try it out and see if it works, but definitely stay tuned for that. But what's nice about this is that we get a 50% charge in only 35 minutes now on iPad Pro, because again, the iPad Pro from a charging perspective has never been on par with some of the other fast charging tablets on the market. And in that same light with battery life and efficiency, Apple's including their new C1X modem, which is in the new iPhone 17 lineup for better cellular connectivity, saying we get a 50% boost in cellular connectivity and better connectivity overall, and also 30% less power usage when you are using primarily 5G and 4G LTE to be able to get your whatever work done that you need to get done. Because when you are using your actual data connectivity versus an in-house Wi-Fi is always going to give you better battery life versus 5G connectivity, but hopefully the C1X chip does give us better battery life and sustained battery life while being able to work on the go with your data signal. We also got better connectivity upgrades overall with Apple's brand new N1 chip, which also, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, was introduced with the new iPhone 17 lineup, but we now go from Wi-Fi 6E to Wi-Fi 7, giving us faster support for Wi-Fi 7 speeds and also just better range overall. We also go from Bluetooth 5.3 to Bluetooth 6.0, which gives us just better distances when you are connected to your Bluetooth devices, which is going to work amazingly with your AirPods Pro 3. And then you also get Thread support for smart home integration, which honestly, I haven't even figured out Thread for myself, so if somebody wants to explain that to me in the comments down below like I'm a 5-year-old, by all means, go for it. And then last but not least, we get better external display support. Now, of course, Apple has given us external display support in some form or fashion with iPads since the very beginning, whether you were just mirroring the display to now getting a true extended monitor support with the iPad Pros of the world or the M series iPads of the world. But now we're going to get the ability to support an external display of 120 Hz, and it supports adaptive sync for the first time ever. And this is going to be exclusive to the M5 iPad Pro to start off, but I'm sure it'll trickle down to other iPads. So it does support 120 Hz external displays at 4K, and it still supports a 60 Hz displays at 6K. So if you do want to pair this up with a studio display or the Pro Display XDR or a gaming 120 Hz monitor, that is going to be now possible. And I also think Apple could be insinuating that maybe they are releasing their own 120 Hz display with the iPad Pro at some point. So I'm going to be super excited to be able to play some of these games alongside the iPad Pro on an external display because, like I've said a million times before, this iPad Pro can literally do it all. So just to kind of recap everything around this off, we're getting the new M5 chip in the iPad Pro, giving us a 45% boost in graphics, and it's built and restructured for AI. We get a new 12 gigs of RAM standard on the baseline iPad Pro. We get faster charging, we get the C1X modem for faster data connectivity, the N1 wireless chip built into the iPad Pro for other connectivity inside of your house, as well as that 120 Hz external display, and just overall better battery life and better efficiency when it comes to that M5 iPad Pro. So at the end of the day, who is this iPad Pro for? Should you buy it if you have an M4? Again, it really depends on what your workflow is. Is your iPad just a tablet that you throw around the house? Then absolutely not. You do not need to upgrade your M4 iPad Pro to the M5, but I think you know who you are if you do want to upgrade from the M4 to the M5. Do you need that better sustained kind of top-end overall graphics performance? Do you need a little bit more when it comes to an AI workload performance standpoint? Do you need that kind of upper echelon of being able to push those iPad Pros all the way to that kind of nth limit? Let me know in the comment down below if that's who you are, but if you have anything from an M1 to an M4 iPad Pro, maybe I'll hold off at least for now, and maybe even the M4 iPad Pro could go on sale on Amazon, so I'll leave some of those links down below for you guys to check out. But that'll do it for this video, everybody. If you did make it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. Might have to change that one up because my dolphins are absolutely ruining me, but that'll do it, everybody. If you want to watch more videos like this one, like whether or not you should go with the 17 Pro Max or the 17 Pro iPhone and what my thoughts have been 1 month later, click on one of these videos right here. Until next time, I'm Fernando. Peace, everyone. Get subscribed because the M5 iPad Pro is coming in tomorrow, and we got a lot of videos and tests that I want to run compared to the M4 iPad Pro. Peace.